So James says, even so, faith, if it hath not works, it's dead being alone. Yea, a man may say, Thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works. I will show thee my faith by my works. Um, thou believest that there is one God, thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble, but wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? You know, I've heard this scripture read out, kind of like someone throwing down a gauntlet. You know, what works are you doing for Christ? Well, you know, and so and you get a real hard look, and I started thinking about that, just thinking about this congregation. You know, it's just something that started coming, and I started thinking back through the history, the people I've known and the history of the congregation. I don't, I don't, and all that it's done. I don't know a lot about the history. Just I've been here. I'm almost 70, 69, nearly 69, a few days, and I've been associated one way or another through family with this congregation for my whole life. And so, Paul, he engaged in a little bit of bragging in the last three chapters of Second Corinthians. These words, this is in 2 Corinthians 11:1. Would to God that you would bear with me a little in my folly, and indeed bear with me. Saying what he was saying was, this is silly to have to do. You guys in Corinth, though, you seem to be so impressed with people's credentials. People will brag about their credentials. I want to brag a little bit about mine. And so he goes on, and he talks about his lineage, his works, his sufferings, how many times he'd been beaten, and his labors, and so on. And it's an impressive list. So, and I started thinking about the congregation, because we're just the congregation right now, but we're an outgrowth of the original, when it started. Here we are, they started it, and then it went on, and generation and so on passed, and here we are, right? Okay, so we're part of that, part of the beginning. Now, I know that it was established in 1909. And I just found out, I didn't know this, but remember the old hot lunch room up there? That was the first church building. I didn't know that. It was moved up there. You guys, I hear people, you see people nodding. Yeah, we know all that stuff. Well, I didn't. Okay, all right. And so anyway, the hot lunch room, that's all it ever was. That's where the ladies did their quilting. Well, anyway, and so Chuck, he's got a picture of the church. I remember for a while, not very long, we met in the chapel on top of the hill, past the first building. And there was one up where Chuck's house is now, and I'm in that picture. That was I was about 6 months old, and Vashti was holding me. Man, Vashti. So I think I was asleep. But anyway, it looked that way, and so. There's a great history book. See, somebody put together a great history book that Marcia's got. She lent me, and it shows that it has pictures of some of the members in the late 1920s. And I'll tell you what, man, that was a rough-looking bunch of people. They all of them, and I guess that's the way people looked back then. I don't know. I think we're much friendlier, but not nearly so tough. Those guys were. Oh. And so I believe it mentioned Mrs. Goss. I believe that was my Ma. I think that's Ma Goss, my great grandmother, is who I think that is. And anyway, they're all gone. I never met these guys. They were here from 1909, and then they died off. And I think I was born when Ma Goss died, but I never knew her, because I was too small. And so. And I guess my understanding is this building was built around 1948. And according to that book, see, these guys here took the Davis boys and all, who were here at the time. They took they went over to Santa Rosa and bought two old apartment buildings and drug them over here, stuck them together, remodeled them, and here we are. To me, when I came in, my earliest days, this place is bright, it's a brand new building, but it's not. It was actually it was remodeled. I had no idea that was the case. It was just two buildings stuck together, and I wouldn't have known except for that history book. See, when I was born, the church, that's not the building I'm talking about, but the congregation had been established for 38 years around about. And so Pacific Christian Academy, see, School of Unselfish Service, see, that was established in 1918. See, and later these other two buildings were stacked up on each other to make the hot lunch room, or not, make the chapel and the classes that were underneath that chapel. Okay, and I remember that sign that the ladies painted up there, unselfish service, and they had a picture. Remember that mural that was up there that you saw the sun setting in the west or rising. The sun. We're on the west coast, so it was setting. It was a setting sun. All I knew was that all the time we were in chapel, I really, really wanted to be out at the beach because that was what that seemed. That's what it looked like, and I wanted to be there, not here. So anyway, lumber was expensive. See, so they found buildings is what they did. You couldn't buy new lumber. You just have to find buildings and you remodel them and reuse them. See, these days we call it repurposing, but we reused them. That's what that was. And so, see, I just described that. We got these two old buildings from over to Santa Rosa, drug them around, we stacked them up, put them together, whatever like that. See, it's easy to say, but see, you got to get the picture that they sweated when they did this. They sweat. It wasn't easy. It was a farming and a lumber community back in the 20s and 30s. Money wasn't easy to come by. I saw a ledger that recorded what each individual of the congregation had donated. I didn't know they did that. They kept a record down. Okay, you put in so much in like that. Most of the recorded amounts were nickels and dimes and quarters and pennies. Homer Parnell, is 6 cents, 11 cents, whatever it was. That's what he had. So you put that in the kitty. Okay, we didn't have much money. It was hard, and of course, and all the sweat equity that went into it. We know about that these days. And what about the lunches made by the ladies? That's not easy to do back then either. All that canning they did, and then turn it into cherry pies and lemon meringue pies on it. Thank you very much. Those are good too. And all the things that they did. That wasn't an easy thing to do. It was hard work. And so when I started here in the first grade, see the men in this church, in the church, they were still working on the second half of those slanted buildings up there, those ones right along the road, those classrooms. And Roger Davis and I and my cousin Galen, we played cards with those little small wedge-shaped pieces of wood. We'd dig little roads and run them around. Those pieces of wood. We didn't have wheels? Nobody had play cards with wheels back then. We couldn't afford them if they did have them. See, and so we didn't get much time off during the year either. At the school year, see, most of the time we get out like 3 weeks early. We didn't get holidays, very short holidays, very few holidays. And later on, I was told the reason was because by this time, the cherry crop comes in early, and so you need the kids out to pick the cherries. So they needed to work on the farm, so we got out early, about 3 weeks early, in fact. And so, and see, the reason for all of this work, the sacrifice, it was just for Christ, everybody, they were doing what they could to save as many kids as they could for the kingdom of Christ. There wasn't any other reason there for that, right? We all understand that. That's what we want to do. We want to save our kids. And see, and at the beginning, I was given to understand that the school didn't even charge tuition. The teachers labored without pay. I guess they were given gifts of produce and like that, but other than that, I don't know how they did that. I don't know how you could do that. I was told that's what happened though. See, I see more nods. I wasn't there. I don't know. I was going to school. Sister Cathcart, she lived in one of those little rooms out back of that the hot lunch room up there, the quilting place, and. We all called each other brother and sister back there. I still know her Sister Cathcart. I never knew her first name. Unselfish service, though, was a motto. Unselfish service was given. That was what was done. That was done there. Okay. It was monumental. Monumental labor was invested into the building of the school. Monumental labor was invested in the operation of the school, too. Anybody remember? Of course, everybody who's my age remembers blue chip stamps, right? A green chip, and then, if you buy gas over here, you get double, triple, quadruple stamps. And then finally they had to have larger denomination. That was, that was a lesson in economics and inflation was what that was, more and more, more stamps, because, well, they just printed more. So anyway, but you remember what happened was that I think it was a blue chip stamp drive. It might have been green chip stamp, but I think it was blue, the way I remember, because those are most popular anyway. And thousands and thousands of stamps were given, maybe millions, I don't know how many, but they were licked and stuck in books and like that. And then books were stacked up and put in boxes and like that. You know what we did with those? We bought a school bus with blue chip stamps. Whoa. Okay, cool. That was a lot of work, a lot of gathering, and school. That's not the only activity of this congregation. That was just that. What else was happening? Laura Lee, I just found out not too many years back that Laura Lee, and she was telling me about it, that her and other ladies, they'd go to yard sales in various places, and they would gather yardage. She called it yardage. It was cloth that you could cut up, big pieces, like, I don't know, sheets and stuff that you could cut up, though, and wash and get all cleaned up really good, and then roll them up in bandages and sent them to this hospital in Africa. Okay, that was just something that you wouldn't know anything about that. They just did it, and then in casual conversation, it comes up, and whoa, I had no idea that was going on. Missionaries are supported. Were supported. I think the congregation supported the Bertels, who spent many years in Africa and even adopted a little girl and brought her back with them when they came back. So, it supported orphans' homes in Mexico and outreach in France, and Brother Dieterchek, who preached in various locations in Europe. And, in Matthew 10:42, Jesus remarks that if anybody gave even so much as a cup of cold water to someone in the name of a disciple, he would in no wise lose his reward. All right. This congregation, remember that box back there in the corner when we gathered up $6,000 and sent it in so that they could help buy a well drilling rig. That well drilling rig has provided millions of cups of cold water to millions of people in Ethiopia is where that went. Okay, there's 2 of them there now. I'm sure that no one but God knows all the work that's been done by the congregation corporately and individually as individuals. Who knows? As far as the work of the individuals in the church is concerned, it's really a case of the right hand not knowing what the left's up to. We don't know. Food being brought to family that lost somebody. That happened to us. When I when we lost my sister, Dina Ray, there were visits to people in the hospitals, and quilts were made and given. And, every once in a while in casual conversation, see, another act of kindness just comes up, will be mentioned. I never knew about that. I didn't know about that. Didn't know about the other. See, it's just that secretive left hand again, sneaking around doing acts of kindness without anybody knowing. That's what that is. See, the effects of their labor, that all started way back in 1909, That's where it began. That's who those guys laid the foundation for what has been done since, right? And so it's like ripples in a pond. See, all that work still paying off to this day. See, their efforts are paying off to me personally. And I want to talk about my own family just a little bit. And the reason I'm using my family is because I know more about it. I still don't know everything even my family does. I don't know. But anyway, that's mostly what I know about. And we're just an example of the work that the left hand that the right hand didn't know anything about. Any one of us could be standing up here, saying the same things about their family. Talking about the influence that this church has had on their family. And so I'm just, my family's just a case in point, nothing big, And I was talking about this with Marcia, and so she started pointing out, how many others were engaged in the work of the Lord. Gary and Sandy come to mind, Rod and Betty, all these guys, just on and on and on. And they've gone to, Gary and Sandy, for instance, went to Afghanistan. Karen taught at PCA for a long time. So did Ethel. Dean served on the board for a long time, and Gloria and Tony, with a little help from their friends, they made about 1,000,000 apple pies to support the school. Probably still bleeding, from it. Uh, uh, you know, Housing and feeding the homeless, endless pies, endless desserts, endless casseroles, you know, and on and on and on. See, I don't mean to leave anybody out, but it's like Paul said to the Hebrews, in Hebrews, he said, look, there's just not enough time to mention everybody, right? And so I get, I'm talking, so I'll use my family. when you guys talk, you can use yours. Anyway, see, my mother, she lost her first husband in the invasion of Normandy on D-Day. And so she was left with my brothers, Bob and Bill, and she heard about this Christian school, and she said, well, I'd like my kids to be raised up there. And so she somehow she writes she wanted to move up, didn't have a place to stay, writes to the congregation, anybody can take us in, and a place was found for her up before Oak Grove is as big as it is, but anyway, in a house that was where Oak Grove is now. They had expanded their school grounds later. And so anyway, so a place was found for her, and later on she was able to acquire a small lot outside of town. And my granddad came up to help her build a house. And I don't know if anybody else remembers it, but we do. That Grandpa Dell, he went out there to help my granddad build a house for my mom because she was a member of the congregation. He just did that, shows up, helps, hammers, nails, saws, boards, right along with us because that's all, just because, And so anyway, later my mom married again, and 8 more of us came along, and see, most of us attended PCA up here one time or another, one way or another, and all of us attended church here. Most of it was unwilling, I don't want to go to church, I still have plan to do, but you know how it is for kids, they would rather be anywhere else than in church, and so same for us. Mom insisted anyway, and the point is, see, that because of this congregation, each and every one of us were brought up believing in God. Whether or not we were in obedience, we knew who he was, right? Because of this congregation, And so it's the congregation that gave us, and the work of its members that gave us the knowledge of God in the first place, And so we assumed we were going to hell, because we weren't in obedience, right? We weren't, we still had messing around to do, and so we talked about it. Yeah, I'm going to, I know I'm going to hell, and so anyway, but still, in all, time goes on, and so we all turn to Christ, gradually over the course of time. That's what happens, and so okay, so as the work of this as a result, as a consequence of this congregation, see, my brother Norman's a street preacher, and he has preached to thousands of people. Thousands. He's preached in China. He's preached in Israel. He's preached on the West Bank. He's had bottles and rocks thrown at him in San Francisco and in Oakland, and some places he's received really well, okay? But thousands. He's preached in Utah, As a result of the work of this congregation, the ripple effect, we baptized more than 50 people up at Bill's Ranch in that pond up there in that swimming hole. We quit counting it. We don't even remember. I don't know. I know that Norris's son Adam was baptized up there. My wife Alice, my daughter Heather, Mitch, Rusty, other kids, grandkids, hitchhikers, strangers were baptized up there. People we didn't even know that. What you do? What about Jesus? Well, I want to get baptized, and so bring him in. People in the byways, and we've baptized people in the Russian River, in the ocean, in Green Valley Creek, in swimming pools, in ponds by the road out in the desert. David did that. They get him to tell you that tale, when he picked up a hitchhiker, and the guy kept saying, "Yeah, I should get baptized," And then David says, "Well, how about this water we're driving by?" And they go, "Oh, well, not right now." And then they talk about some more, and then the guy says, "Yeah, I should have taken advantage of that water back there." And then right then they're driving by another body of water beside the road. And David says, "Well, how about this one?" Eventually, by the third body of water, though, David was out there baptizing it. Right? This guy was a believer in Christ. I haven't even mentioned all the people baptized here. He said, I was baptized here. John Lee, he was the deserter from the military. We baptized John Lee here. It was cold. I didn't know how to turn on the heater. I'm not sure I know how to turn on the heater. Dean keeps telling me, and I keep forgetting. I'm sorry, but Dean, if we need that heater, I'm going to call you up again. So anyway, Joseph and Gail and I don't know how many others, all as a result of this congregation. See, and I taught 8 years at PCA because of the work of those guys, those men and women, that went before. And Karen talked much longer than that. I had no idea. You were there when I started. You were there when I left. 15 years. 15 years. Why? Because of what was started way back in '09. My son Matt, he attended PCA, pretty rebellious too, and he was a hard, well, anyway, explicative deleted. Okay, and he's the preacher of a church now in Sacramento. And he has a ministry for public school kids. He calls me up every once in a while. We talk preacher stuff. That's cool to talk preacher stuff with your own son. That's neat. Whoa, my daughter Noelle, she's in charge of Sunday morning music sound system at her church. They have a sound system. Well, obviously, it's an assembly, right? Okay, and so anyway, and she's in charge of women's ministries there. I don't know how she finds the time. My granddaughter, she composes Christian music, and sometimes they perform that in their church. And that's just my family. Marcia's daughter and her husband teaching in Africa. They're on the prayer list. Keep bring them back safely when they're done. Benny Lee's singing here. That's just my family. What's been the info? Okay, so who else could get up here and talk about their families like this? See, what's been the influence of this congregation through other families besides mine? Who knows? I couldn't calculate it. Who would know? Just how much time do we have? We can't. We're out of time. We can't do that. We are out of time. I'm not even. It goes on and on and on. See, and the point is, here's a small congregation. We're in some rural backwater in the coastal hills of Northern California, attended by nobody in particular, but the effects of what has been done here have reached around the world. To China, Japan and Africa, Europe, Asia, Mexico, South America. Mostly we don't think about that. Christ does. He knows. He thinks about it. He adds it up. He takes account. We do whatever we do, and then we forget about it. On to the next job, right? That's the way it works. We've had our problems, like any congregation. We had imperfect understanding of scriptures. We got problems with doctrine sometimes, problems with personalities, problems with sin. You read about New Testament churches, they had all the same problems we do. It's the same. Despite all the problems, see, the fact is that this congregation, as a corporation and as individuals, has performed magnificently. Magnificently is what's been done here. Now, I want to make a few points with all that. First is, whatever spiritual success I and my family have had, it's partly due to the efforts of this congregation. Okay? It influences, the congregation influences every word I say, every thought I think. And it doesn't mean I echo our traditions. I don't. But it does mean I think about God a lot because of the people here. You think that Christ discounts, do you think? Do you think that Christ discounts the labor of those who've gone before? Our work redounds to the credit of those who have labored before us. See, Paul planted, Apollos watered, we have reaped the increase. That's us. Okay. Behold, I come quickly, Jesus says. My reward is with me to give to every man according as his work shall be. That's in Revelation 22 and 12. The returns of their labor, they're still accruing to their account. Now, what we do is still because of them, right? So, does anybody get credit for the work of someone else? Of course they do. You bet. Jesus talked about that, Matthew 10:41. He that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. He that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. Of course, we enter into each other's labors. The second thing is that as Christians, naturally, we naturally help. we naturally work. It's just our nature. It's what we do. Okay. Some Christians, they're less talented than others. Some are less bold. Some are poorer. Some smarter. Some work harder. And we're all the same body. It doesn't make any difference. And every believer does something for Christ. Prayers or encouragement or admonishment, things we don't even count as work, but they are counted by Christ. As Christian Life Center, it was Christian Life Center in Windsor when it was there. There was a school called Genesis, and they trained preachers. Okay, and they'd be sent to different places, different congregations, the mission field, and so on. And at the graduating ceremony, some of the audience were given an opportunity to pray for the graduating class, wherever they were going to go. And so this one young man came up to the microphone. It was obvious that he was handicapped, mentally. He was had a difficult time getting his words out. But he wasn't as intelligent. He wasn't as intelligent as others. He was handicapped. But what he said, when he said something like this, he says, "Now, I know I'm not very smart," in his stumbling way. And he said, "I want you to know that every day I pray for you." Now, I'm sorry I get all mushy. That's just something that happens, okay? But this guy had no great talent. Nothing. But he's one of those members that Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians 12, 21 through 25. And let me read this. "The eye can't say to the church, 'I have no need of thee,' nor again the head to the feet, 'I have no need of you.' I have no need of you. Nay, much more, those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary. Those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, upon those we bestow more abundant honor, and our unseemly parts have more abundant comeliness. For our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to that part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another." See? Now, some do their work at the center of attention. Ta-da! That's me. Everybody's watching, right? But most don't. Most do their work quietly, unseen, unnoticed, unremarked. Most of us do it that way. The left hand again, out there someplace doing something that nobody knows about except Jesus. But the unseen work isn't any less important. In fact, it's more important. The prayer of the mentally handicapped person, that guy, it was empowered with the groaning of the Spirit no less than the prayer of the best teacher. Okay? The work of the lady who sets her casserole down at the end of the table at the church potluck is no more overlooked by Christ than the work of the preacher. We're one body altogether. Finally, I want to point out one last thing about the work done here in Graton. See, it was done under an incredible spiritual burden, one that was unnecessary but was real nevertheless. Okay, these men and women, they worked their whole lives. They sacrificed time and money and labor, not even knowing for sure if they were saved, because that's our tradition. Never even being sure of their welcome into heaven at the moment of death, waiting their whole lives for the moment of death to see if they were acceptable to God. Now, bearing that load of fear and doubt and uncertainty is tough. That's tough. Now, I've talked about this before. In fact, I've been talking about this for years, as long as I've been here. And I'm going to talk about it again. I've been pointing out the promises of God, all the assurances of salvation, all the examples of sins forgiven, even to the oath that God bound himself with that guarantees our security. I've been talking about these things for more than 30 years because I know from experience that doubt is a heavy burden. But the joy of salvation makes any load light. Jesus said this, that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. That was Matthew 11:30. But wearing uncertainty around your neck is not an easy yoke. And doubting whether God even wants you in heaven, it makes everything heavy. We have shortcomings. We all sin during each day and week. But even so, where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. So here's my advice. I have advice now. Okay. The advice is very deep advice, very important, very wise, because I'm your preacher. And here it is. You ready? Keep on keeping on. There. That's it. Jesus said the same thing to the church in Philadelphia. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast. Let no man take thy crown. Hang on. Jesus is coming. That's the message. Try not to doubt your acceptability with Christ. It's going to happen anyway. Satan likes doubt. He causes it all the time. Try not to pay attention to generalized accusations and hard looks. Just do your job as unto the Lord. Take care of your family. Pay your taxes. Drive safely. Pray for the man who cut you off in traffic. Don't be like me who wants to pinch his head off. Pray for the motorcycle rider in the middle of rush hour. Help your neighbor if you can, especially those who lost homes in the fires. And if we notice any of our members living in a bus, like Mitch used to, we need to see to it that you got better heat than candles next time. Okay? And I deeply suspect that Jesus would like us to watch less TV. I suspect he'd like us to play Pokemon less, whatever Pokemon is. I don't even know what it is, okay? But it's out there. I think he would like us to mess with our smartphones less. And I think he'd like us to think about him and his work more. No, I'm not talking to Laura Lee because Laura Lee don't even have a TV. Okay, but that's the rest of anybody out there like me. I'm the one I'm preaching to right now. So it's time for the invitation. The invitation to the God of daily living. To the God who knows about dirty dishes and dirty diapers. To the God who understands stress at work and nights of worry and sick kids and paychecks that don't stretch enough. This is the invitation to God who says, hang on. I'm coming. I'll be there in a second. You just hang on.